If you got a copy of God's Word, we're going to be in Exodus chapter 16. We did that in the first service, and I was fine. I did not get in touch with my emotional side whatsoever. But for whatever reason, commissioning MC in this service and seeing my daughter, my mind went back to 8 years ago. And for MC's parents, I know how you feel. We took that first child God gave us, and we sent her to Cambodia and Thailand for 4 months. And you would think in the world in which we live in, the joy of technology, man, there'd be Zoom calls every night. We would go weeks and not know what was going on in our daughter's life. And so seeing this young lady, again, same age as my daughter, when God called her to go to the mission field, saying, you know what, I'm going to surrender it all. I'm going to surrender my plans, my purpose, my future, what I want to do, and I'm going to surrender it all. We've been studying a group of people called the Hebrew nation, the Israelites. Since January, we began to study going through the book of Exodus, and if there ever was a group of people that we could look at in the Bible and say, surely they would be willing to surrender it all, it would be them. For 400 years, they've been in captivity. They've been slaves. God sends them a deliverer. God sends these 10 plagues, and they're not touched by any of them. God gives them freedom, and as they're leaving Egypt, God gives them the ability to plunder the Egyptians, to take gold and silver and garments and everything they need. And then on that journey, they find themselves at the Red Sea. Pharaoh's army is pursuing after them, and God provides a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night to block the way as he sends this east wind to split the Red Sea, and they cross over on dry land. And as soon as the last Hebrew gets over on dry land, the cloud is removed and Pharaoh's army pursues to the middle of the sea, and then the sea collapses on them and their pursuers are destroyed. And in a moment of praise and adoration, they sing praise to the Lord, and it lasted about 3 days. And they find themselves in Marah with no water. And what does God do? He provides a tree to make the bitter waters sweet. And then they leave that place and they journey to Elim. And when they get to Elim, what do they find? 12 springs of water. One tribe, one spring. 70 palm and date trees. 5 trees for every tribe. All these other plants and vegetation that was there to provide for everything they need. And then they make the journey, and we've picked up last week, where they're called to take God at his word and to trust his word. And what do? They begin to murmur and to complain. Oh, that we had stayed in Egypt, where we had the pots of meat and all the bread we can eat, and yet there's nothing that says that's what took place. But what the text does say takes place is that their persecutors, their taskmasters made life hard. Pharaoh, their ruler, made life even harder, and yet God provided everything they need. He provided everything they need, and we would think if ever there was a group of people that would say, you know what, we're just going to surrender it all to you, God, you've been so good to us. But when they had the opportunity to shine, all they would do was whine. And it's no different today. We pick up in the text today and we find ourselves, we're continuing the series of the call, and it's the call to follow his instructions and obey him. To hear what they're supposed to do and then to make the decision to do it. For Donald, the instructions to go be an FCA missionary. For MC to go be an IMB missionary. They heard the call and they followed him. They were obedient to these commandments in his life. But today, as we look at the text, we'll see for these people, the ones that had every reason to truly trust in the Lord, to truly surrender it all. Once again, they make the decision to whine and to not shine. Now, hopefully you found your way to Exodus chapter 16. If you got a smart device or a tablet, we're going to be in the amplified version. And if you're following along in a different translation, that's fine. The text that'll be on the screen. And for those of you joining us online, that'll also be the text on your screen as well as we make our journey through the call in the book of Exodus. But as we make our way there, if you found your way to Exodus chapter 16, so that all the viewers online can hear you, let me hear you say, open the book. Open the book. Thank you very much. Verse number 6. So Moses and Aaron said to all of Israel. Now there's an interesting dynamic that we find in verse number 6. When the nation of Israel left Egypt, it was not just the nation of Israel. There are passages that will actually talk about the mixed multitude. There were Egyptians, there were Canaanites, there were Perizzites, there were all of these different tribes, all these different nations that they had taken slave labor from all of these different places. And as the Hebrews get their freedom, some of those people leave with them. They're the mixed multitude. But as God speaks, he doesn't speak to the mixed multitude. Let me say to you, the mixed multitude was with them, but the mixed multitude was not for them. You need to take a serious look at your life and understand that everybody that's with you is not for you, but everybody that's for you may not be with you. God may have some people that are going to work in your life that they're not with you right now. But there are some people in your life right now, only God can make them work for you. Because even though they're with you, they're not for you. This mixed multitude are excluded from the message because Moses and Aaron says to all of Israel, at evening, you shall know that the Lord has brought you out of the land of Egypt. How ironic that after everything God had done for them, all the miracles that we just mentioned in our opening, that it would be at evening time that they would know that God was with them. How soon they are quickly to forget all that God has done for them. They so quickly forget the miracles. They so quickly forget the provision. They so quickly forget everything that God has done. But Moses and Aaron say to the nation of Israel, at evening time you will know that the Lord has brought you out of the land of Egypt, and in the morning you will see the glory of the Lord. Now for months they've been on this journey. Pillar of cloud by day, pillar of fire by night. He's leading them. Wherever he leads, they go. They don't have GPS other than God's positioning system. Nobody knows where they're going, but God's leading them, and they're following him. And he says, in the morning, you're going to see the glory, you're going to see the Shekinah glory of the Lord. And we would think if we were the people hearing this message, there's like, yes, this is awesome, this is great. And then he says, for he hears your murmurings against the Lord. What are we that you murmur and rebel against us? Now, in the midst of their whining, who had they been whining to? Moses and Aaron. Oh, that you had just left us in Egypt. Oh, is this why you brought us out here that we may die in the wilderness? Oh, were there not enough graves in Egypt that you could just leave us there? But what Moses says, this is the message from the Lord. He has heard your murmurings against him. You're complaining against us, but look at what Moses says. What are we? We are but the messengers giving you the message from the Lord, and he has heard your murmurings. He has heard your whining when you should have been shining because of his goodness. In verse number 8, Moses says this will happen when the Lord gives you meat to eat in the evening, and in the morning enough bread to be fully satisfied. Now, if you're with us last week, we had the conversation where he talked about the bread from heaven. And so many times when we read passages like that, in our minds, we kind of envision, if you remember the cartoon from years gone by called Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, where this guy creates this machine and these meatballs begin to fall from the sky, and we envision like loaves of bread falling from the sky. Well, that's not exactly what he's going to do. But there is going to be bread from heaven. But in last week's text, he didn't say anything about meat. But look at what he says in today's text. He says that there will be meat to eat in the evening, and in the morning enough bread to be fully satisfied. Let me ask you a question in your relationship with the Lord. Are you truly, fully satisfied? You know, there was a commercial years ago, I don't remember which restaurant it was, but there'd be this guy, he'd be at this restaurant, he would say, I'm full. In other words, I got everything I need. I wonder how many times in our walk of faith we could literally look at the Lord and say, I'm full. I'm satisfied. You've given me everything I need. Everything I need, my Father has it. He gives them this, and then he says, because the Lord has heard your murmurings against him. For what are we? Your murmurings are not against us, but against the Lord. Again, Moses is giving that dual-edged sword of good news, bad news. Good news, you're going to get all the meat, all the bread you want to eat. Bad news is the Lord's heard your murmuring against him. The dynamic is taking place of where in the midst of God leading them to take these steps of faith with him, because every step they take is a step of faith because they do not know where they're going. Moses is leading them as he follows after the Lord. And as they're taking this journey, as they're following him, all they can do is murmur about the changes, murmur about what's taking place. Now, I want you to look around in this room. There's not a whole lot of elbow room space in this service. We affectionately refer to the 8 o'clock service as the elbow room service. If you want plenty of space, come at 8 o'clock. If you want a little more space, come at 11 o'clock. But we understand because for the last 5 years, we have been tracking our attendance. For the last 5 years, in the fall of the year, our attendance usually increases by 12 to 14% across the board for 5 years in a row. Last Sunday, we had right at 1,700, which means in the coming weeks, if we continue to track at that growth projection, we'll be over 1,900. And here's the other reality. The majority of the people, they want to come to the 9:30 service. And we understand that. And so what is the staff and leadership doing? We're following the Lord in how He's leading us. He's leading us that beginning the second week in September, there will be a simultaneous fourth service at 9:30 in auditorium number 2. If you came at Easter, you know that's what we did at Easter because this room was completely full, and so we had 200 plus over in that auditorium. We're doing that this coming September, the second week in September. But doing that, guess what it's causing? It's causing our youth ministry to turn their schedules upside down. It's turning all these wonderful volunteers that serve on praise teams and serve in the orchestra. And if you're a part of the choir, I think you guys have your first practice coming up next week. It's causing everybody's schedules to get changed. And we're not just doing it to give people something to murmur about. Well, I'm having to park further away. I'm having to change what service I have to go to. I'm having to change what service I go to which auditorium. I've been attending, and I've got a musical gift, talent, and ability, and I haven't said anything, but I know that Carson and the team need more people to play instruments and need more people to sing, so I'm going to get out of my comfort zone, and I'm going to say, and all of these things are being done. Why? Because we're following the Lord's direction. It would be easier for us at 9:30 to put a sign out front and say, we're full, go down the road. But instead we're saying the Lord's leading us to make room for more to hear. The Lord's leading us to make it possible for all to hear. Well, preacher, what are you going to do if the 8 o'clock service gets full? I'm going to shout hallelujah because that's a long way from it being full. What about the 11 o'clock? Well, 11 o'clock typically is about 15 to 20% of what you see right now. What if the 11 o'clock starts getting full? We'll go to a fifth service. Until God gives us a satellite campus that we can go to a community and say, we're coming to you instead of you coming to us, we're going to do everything we can. I love it on Sunday afternoons when I'm absolutely exhausted. I love it on Monday after the other pastors preach and they tell me, man, I didn't realize how hard it was to preach 3 times. Well, guess what? You get ready to do it 4 times. It's wonderful. Folks, I'm at the stage and age in my life, I want to burn out for the Lord. I don't want to rust out. I'm an organ donor. I want them, when the Lord calls me home, to open me up and say, he's shot. he wore it out. There's nothing left. That's just where I'm at. We got to hurry. Verse number 9, then Moses said to Aaron, say to all the congregation of Israel, once again, just to Israel, approach the Lord because he's heard your murmurings. Verse 10 through 12, so it happened that as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of Israel, they looked toward the wilderness, and behold, the glory and the brilliance of the Lord appeared in the cloud. Imagine in your mind's eye for just a moment, you've been following this cloud by day, pillar of fire by night. Now the cloud by day, there is this illumination of this figure in the midst of the cloud. We don't know if it's the Shekinah glory that's lighting him up or the lightning flashing behind him, but in that cloud you see the image of someone, and it's the pre-incarnate Christ, a Christophany there in the Old Testament. They are seeing the presence and the glory of the Lord right there in front of them. Just as he said, in the morning you will see it. It says the Lord appeared in the cloud. Then the Lord spoke to Moses saying, I have heard the murmurings of the Israelites. Speak to them saying, it is time to take you to the woodshed. There's a generation that have no context what that means. But that's not what he says. It's time for me to make you believe these cow horns will hook. There's a generation that have no context of what that means. But that's not what he says. At a time that they deserve judgment, I have heard your murmurings. He gives them mercy. Look at what he says. At twilight, you shall eat meat. And in the morning, you shall be filled with bread. And you shall know that I am the Lord your God. This paints a picture for you and I, no different than these people in this text, that at a time when we probably deserve judgment, he gave us mercy. At a time that we deserve to be taken to the woodshed, he didn't do that. At a time that we deserve for him to make us believe those cow horns will hook, he didn't do that. It's obvious some of y'all weren't raised with a grandma with a wooden spoon, but at the time that some of y'all deserved that wooden spoon, you didn't get it. The people didn't get what they deserved. They got mercy. They got grace. And God is no different with us. That at times when we're murmuring against him, he still gives us the goodness of a good father. Listen back to these verses we just read. He hears your murmurings against the Lord. The Lord has heard your murmurings against him. Your murmurings are against the Lord. He has heard your murmurings. I have heard the murmurings. There's nothing that they've said against Moses and Aaron that God has not taken personally. Why? Because they're his messengers. He continues on in 13 and 14. He says, so in the evening, the quails came up and covered the camp. A couple of months ago, I was blessed with an opportunity to do something I'd never done before. Grew up in the country. I mean, my dad was a pheasant hunter, quail hunter. I've heard stories about when him and my mom first got married about how he would go kill quail and pheasant and all this stuff. And then apparently once he had 2 boys, he didn't do much hunting after that. He hunted for us to find out where we were at the farm, setting something on fire apparently. But anyway, I got an opportunity to go on a pheasant hunt, on a quail hunt. And it was amazing. I mean, some of those birds have never been so safe in all of their life because I am not a good shot. But we would be walking with the dog and you hear this, and man, they'd just come up out of nowhere. And I'd fire 2 rounds and they just keep on flying. But I think I got 8. Ministerially speaking, almost 15. But the dynamic was, we had to stomp around to get those birds to fly. All they had to do was wait for twilight. He said at twilight, they're going to come up on the camp. They're going to come up over the horizon and they're going to land right here in the midst of you. He says, and in the morning, there was a blanket of dew around the camp. When the layer of dew evaporated on the surface of the wilderness, there was a fine flake-like thing as fine as frost on the ground. The phenomenon of the quail, they'd seen quail before. They knew how to pluck the feathers and how to fix all the quail. They knew how to do all of that. They'd never seen this, what is called a flake-like thing as fine as frost, laying on the ground. If you study in the book of Numbers and in some of the Psalms, it actually talks about that they were actually able to take this, they were able to knead it into like a powder, kind of like flour. They could boil it. They could deep fry it. Numbers actually talks about how it was like a doughy, oily texture kind of thing. Now, you think about doughy and oily and deep fried, and what do you get? Krispy Kreme. I mean, this is what they're living. I mean, it's called angel food, and it tastes like honey. But in verse number 15 it says, when the Israelites saw it, they said to one another, what is it? Now we know the word we're going to learn is the word manna. Manna in the original text literally means, what is it? When we just sang about there's manna for today. This is the precept that they're going to have all the manna they need, for they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, this is bread which the Lord has given you to eat. Now, this is where for those people, they have to take Moses at his word and they have to trust his word. They've never seen bread provided like this before. And yet it's also an opportunity for them to follow his instructions and to obey him. The first Israelite, the first Hebrew that actually bent down, took up a handful of it and put it in his mouth, he was the first one to answer the call to follow the instructions and obey him. He was the first one to taste and see how good God was. To taste and see that honey taste that manna produced in their mouth. Verse 16 says, this is what the Lord has commanded. Every man gather as much of it as he needs. Take an omer, a little over 2 quarts for each person, according to the number of people each of you has in his tent. In other words, there was individual responsibility. Each person had to gather as much as they needed. If you had a family of 2, get 2 omers, 4 quarts. Family of 4, 4 omers. Family of 11, 11 omers. And I thought about what would be a great visual to kind of show you the size of an omer. This is a 2-quart jar. It is a 2-quart jar that is filled with the following. It is filled with a flake-like thing as fine as frost. Frosted Flakes. I mean, now if you study the text, it was probably more like these Frosted Flakes down here. I mean, it's very small. But this is what everybody had to collect. If you were single, get you an omer every morning. 6 days a week, get you an omer. 6th day, get 2 omers. You can't collect it on the 7th. It ain't going to be there on the Sabbath. Family of 11, you got to collect 11 of these. And then they're going to do whatever it has to be done to make it to where they could eat it. They could eat it raw. They could fry it. They could bake it. I mean, it's almost, I think about Bubba Gump talking about how many different ways you can fix shrimp. I don't know how many different ways. I had a conversation with David McAfee. He's like, I wonder if you could take that and fry it and make a donut, to which Nathaniel said, why would you not just go to Krispy Kreme? I mean, it's one of those things. This is what they were dealing with. And so as this is being provided for each of them as much as they needed, it says the Israelites did so, and some gathered much of it, large family, some of it only a little, small family. And when they measured it with an omer, he who had gathered large amounts had no excess. They went around just scooping up as much as they thought they needed. And when they measured it, it was exactly what they needed. It says that the people each of you has in his tent, that is what you are to collect. It says no one had excess, and no one who gathered little had lack of anything they needed. They gathered it according to their need. They answered the call to follow the instructions and obey him. Moses was telling them what God had told him, and they chose to follow the instructions and obey him. And it's one of those things, ultimately, when we look at this dynamic in our lives, just like they had to trust in the unknown of what it would look like if they gathered it, what they would do with it afterwards, we have to have that willingness and ability in our lives to follow the Lord. To say that, wherever he leads, I'll go. To the person that is far from God, that has never responded to gospel, to hear the gospel. That God so loved you, he sent his son Jesus to die for you. That if you would believe in him, you would not perish but have everlasting life. And with childlike faith, you admit that you're a sinner, believe that Jesus died for you, and then confess him as your Lord. It's that belief for those of us that are professed Christ followers. That just like Donald, just like MC, wherever he leads, we go. We surrender it all to him. We follow him. We obey his instructions. And then Moses said, let none of it be left overnight until the morning. He once again gives them the instructions. Take up as much as you need, but don't leave any of it lying around. In other words, the Lord was sending what they needed, but they needed to do what the Lord was sending them. We need to have that same willingness in all areas of our life. And y'all know how much I love that little word all, because all means all. Verse number 20 and 21, but they did not listen to Moses. Some left a supply of it until morning. Some of them thought, you know what, I've collected my omer, but maybe tomorrow it's not going to happen, so I'm just going to make a little pile over here. I'm going to save a little bit for the rainy day, just in case it doesn't come like it came this morning. And it says that as they left some of it until morning, it bred worms and became foul and rotten. Those that chose not to obey the instructions and obey him created a problem for everybody around them. See, here's the reality. Your sin does not just affect you. Your sin affects everyone in your circle of influence. Every tent that was near the tent that had tried to hide a little over to the corner, that began to rot, that began to smell, guess what they had to deal with? They had to deal with the stink of that rotten manna. They had to deal with the reality that these worms were now crawling on the ground. They had to deal with all of these things because they had not been obedient to do what the Lord had commanded them to do. It says that Moses was angry with them. So they gathered it every morning, each as much as he had needed, because when the sun was hot, it melted. They had but a very brief window to be obedient to his commands. In the morning, when the dew is gone, go out and collect it. Don't leave it until the heat of day, because when the heat of day comes, it's all going to melt away. Each of us in our lives as professed Christ followers, and even if you're not a professed Christ follower, you need to realize that your life is melting away. Every breath you take is one more breath off the number of breaths you have in this life. The scriptures say that our life is like a vapor. You're here today, you're gone tomorrow. I've said it for years. Most of us are only 3 generations away from being forgotten. That's why I continually talk about my grandpa Atkins and my grandpa Waldrop. People that had an impact in my life. My grandpas, my fathers, me, my children. 3 generations. If my children don't talk about their great-grandfathers, they'll be forgotten to time. People won't forget about them. Why? Because time is slipping away. Time is the one factor that you only have so much of. Just like in this omer, there are only so many flakes in this omer. And if you were to eat one by one, ultimately you would finally get to the final one and it would all be gone. My friend, this is a picture of your life. This is a picture of the number of breaths, the number of days that you have, the number of opportunities that you have to obey his commandments and to obey him. These people had every opportunity in the world to surrender it all to him. Yet they chose to whine and to not shine. C.T. Studd, a missionary that lived from 1860 to 1931, he was quoted with making this statement that it's wrecked my life when I think about it every time. Only one life will soon be past. Only what is done for Christ will last. YOLO's true. You only live once. There's no do-over, there's no second chances. Once this life comes to an end, once that Hebrews 9:27 appointed time to die comes for you, then comes the judgment. And only what is done for Christ will last. These people in their obedience to do what God had told them to do, you and I in our obedience to do what he's called us to do, when we choose to do what he has called us to do, that is when we enter into the realm of doing that which will last. These missionaries that we commission today, what they're going to do will last because they're doing it for Christ. The amazing thing is the team comes up. When you look at Matthew chapter 6, the end of verse number 8, the words of Jesus, he says, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. The amazing thing, when you think about the miracle of the quail, it's really not the miracle of the quail, it's the miracle of the scale. For 40 years, this dynamic is going to take place. When they need meat, the Lord is going to provide it. But think about this for just a moment. Before that first twilight, before that first evening, when those quail came down into the camp, long before they'd started migrating in that direction. Long before they started migrating in that direction, there was a generation that had laid eggs that hatched that became those quail. Long before that, there was these nests that were made out of stubble and straw. That before the nests were made, that the eggs were laid in, that hatched, that became the provision for the people. There was a seed that went into the ground that produced the wood, the stubble, the hay, the thatch, all the things that made that nest. See, when we look at miracles like this, we get caught up on the miracle of the scale. My goodness, the thousands upon thousands upon thousands of quail that it would take to feed millions of people. But the miracle is in the scale. The miracle is in the understanding that our Father knows what we have need of before we need it. Some of you have a need right now. God's already providing for it. God's already planted the seed. God's already birthed it in somebody's heart for what's going to take place. See, this is the Old Testament example of the New Testament example Jesus gives with the loaves and fishes. Just 5 loaves and 2 fish. He feeds 5,000 men plus women and children. Long before the people ever got hungry, the Lord had a little boy that had 5 loaves and 2 fish. Long before that little boy had 5 loaves and 2 fish, there was a mama that baked some loaves. That little boy, his daddy went and caught 2 fish. And he goes just thinking he's just going to hear this teacher named Jesus. But when he takes the ordinary that he has in his basket and puts it into the hands of the Lord does something extraordinary with it. The Lord takes the ordinary migration of quail to do the extraordinary feeding his people. I wonder so many times in our lives if when we get to the point that by faith, because it's always by faith, don't miss this, it's always by faith that you answer the call to follow his instructions and obey him. I wonder how many times in our life that simple, ordinary step of obedience is what he uses to do the extraordinary.